Okay, continuing on with this, Kathleen has come to me with a question, and what I normally do to train the trainer or to train someone else who's going to use the alarm matrix, what I try to do is first of all look at the question, see what type of question it is and what level it is, so that we can see to what extent in fact the whole matrix has to be used or not. So what is the question?
Okay, so just to set a little bit of the background and context for this question, Max, I'm a legal studies teacher, and this is a question that I provided to students to help guide and help them make some judgment about the content we're learning in class in relation to the topic of crime. So the question I have for you today, to what extent has law reform within the criminal justice system reflected the moral and ethical standards of the community?
Okay, so the type of question this is they must then understand the concepts that you've been dealing with for this whole topic of crime.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, and in the question you're trying to say, from all of your content, you're trying to see to what extent has that helped them understand basically your subject, which is the law reform within the criminal system.
Yes.
Right, so that's your basic subject. And that's also your content.
So
you're going to the level of evaluation for that.
Okay, so yeah, law reform within the criminal justice system becomes my content.
Yes.
They're being asked to make some judgment, and I'm hoping this is a higher order question.
Definitely,
yes,
definitely
good.
Higher. Yeah.
To then the extent to which this law reform or this content reflects the concept being the moral and ethical standards of the community.
So it's really a critically evaluate. Where you're evaluating and finding out the whole system.
And the extent to which it is reflective of community standards or not.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And where did this question appear? Is it at the beginning of an assessment task, or is it?
Yes, it was. It was. I guess a question I gave the students as an assessment for learning question. I was hoping to help them to have big picture knowledge and a holistic understanding of the criminal justice process, which, when we have a look at the syllabus in a minute, is a very broad and a wide-ranging system. There's quite a lot of content and dot points that we do need to explore. I'm at a point now, though, and this is obviously my discussion with you in context, where the students have been studying and looking at various aspects of the criminal justice system, and I'm now coming back and revisiting this question.
Okay.
The students have had this question for a little bit of time, but I'm now actually spending a bit of time revising and revisiting the content knowledge that I'm hoping they now have, and hoping for them to be able to then organise their knowledge effectively, to be able to then respond in a couple of weeks to a slightly different sounding question.
So it really is part of a reflective process on their knowledge and learn the skills necessary to come to this higher order.
Certainly. So what you see there in front is a matrix using the alarm levels that I've created.
And my question here is, so from this question, how do you first then just divide up the parts and pieces? What are the parts and pieces you're going to be able to begin with the name and define, as you call the identify? Yeah,
so this first level. So for me, obviously, my syllabus, so I might pop that there, pop that here so you can see.
Useful to use your syllabus?
Useful to use my syllabus. So here's the crime syllabus that the students are provided with, and our study of crime would involve about 8 to 10 weeks worth of work where we actually unpack and explore these different content areas. In terms of naming and defining, we obviously have to look and see if we can break down this criminal justice process into some, I guess, manageable parts or components. Might be a nice way to see it. The way that I've done it, and then I'm hoping that you'll see that link on the alarm template as well, is looking mainly at these 3 stages. So the first one being the investigative process, the trial process, and sentencing and punishment. So those are the 3 main components.
Okay.
For the purposes of a question like this, and also for the purposes of my my programming here for learning, those were the 3 that I was going to be using.
Okay.
So if we see how that then would translate onto the alarm framework, you can see the identify, the name and define level.
Yes.
Is requiring students firstly, and also requiring myself in my teaching, to firstly identify what I see as the 3 main components.
So that helps you teach this as well?
Yes, certainly. I mean, what you see here is something I wouldn't necessarily give to the students all in one go. You see I've got the higher order or the driving question at the top here, but this is really a tool that I've used successfully to actually help unpack the content And actually then, I guess...
this is your running sheet.
This is my programming tool, which
Yeah.
helps me then obviously lead the students through different levels and hopefully is eliciting each time a deeper level of understanding, which is obviously at the end here we might go through some of those levels, but at the end enabling them to make some form of judgment or evaluation.
About each one of these.
About each one.
Okay. So we're going to name and define each one, and then
Yes.
go out to here. So describe features and characteristics.
So as an example, I mean, we would then use this from a programming point of view. We would start here with this syllabus component, the investigation process, and we would then break that down into more manageable parts or smaller subsections. So as an example, we might look at bail as a content area, and we would then obviously start to then look at, well, what are the features of bail? And you can see that I've specified for the students' benefit, but also for my own benefit, in framing questions that ask the students to respond to the idea of bail at different levels. So I would start with, as you say, describing the features and characteristics, where they're making some reference maybe at this early stage to some evidence or an example that they can use to bring this issue to life.
That kind of helps the kids know where to bring in examples and things.
Certainly, and I would see this coming in very early at the describe stage. We would then move through these different levels to thread our knowledge to an explain or an analyse, looking at how and why a component or an aspect, namely bail in this case, is significant. What does it involve?
Are we speaking about moral and ethical standards so far?
On this as a framework and a sort of like, I guess, a programming tool for my teaching, I saw these first two levels of the alarm matrix as purely just being content.
Okay.
In terms of purely just getting the students to understand what does it involve, what does it look like, what occurs at this stage. The analytical stage here that you see here, I guess, does require them to start making some, I guess, decisions about the significance. And with that, I can imagine does come then, I guess, the use of some risk-taking, possibly.
A lot.
Yeah. I guess for me, I didn't really see the risk-taking to happen until maybe this critical...
No, it becomes more prominent here.
More prominent here,
Yeah.
okay.
But it's interesting because they have to know their content.
Yes.
And that's for, of course, your subject, any year. So this is actually showing them how to learn their content. And I see you've combined them, which is fine, into the boxes to make it your own.
I did actually there,
Yeah,
yes.
that's good. But to make, now their content is clear, and beyond this point where they're going to take risks, is now what do you do with your content?
Okay.
Which the question actually is telling them to do something with that content.
So I then, reorientating back to the concept in the question, those
Yes.
moral and ethical standards, yeah, I haven't actually explicitly made reference to it until this critically and analytical stage. Now, quite possibly in our discussion as to the significance of it, or the how and why is it significant, we would already possibly be jumping ahead and making some connections to the standards.
That's right. Finding the relationship with that.
And I think my experiences has been is that students do really like to jump ahead. And they really do want to jump ahead and make a judgment very early. This, I guess, provides them with a skill set which helps them build and build on their knowledge.
A skill set, that's the term. That's
skill
good.
set.
That's
To jump then obviously to, where I'm really trying to get the students, which is obviously to a higher order level,
Yes.
where they're able to reflect and reach a considered judgment as to the extent to which something is effective, the extent to which in this case it does reflect moral and ethical standards of the community, and obviously tying together the findings that they've been able to make and we've made as a class as we've worked across these levels. And obviously we're trying to get to this end point, which is an evaluative stage.
Are you finding that it's helping the kids keep to an order or a pattern?
I certainly think so.
Because some kids might bounce around.
And I think that's okay, but I
Yeah.
think it's about them learning the different connections of their learning. Like we have to walk first before we can run, for
That's
lack
right.
of a better analogy.
Yeah.
Another way that I have had success, I might just introduce this other
Yes.
document.
So this is like, so many times this becomes the running sheet for the teacher, as you say.
Yes.
It might be overwhelming for students sometimes, but it helps you keep a pattern in the learning.
Certainly.
And then, so you're going to introduce another.
Well, it helps me guide the different levels that I'm asking the students to consider. And obviously this is done through questioning, either orally or questions that I'm providing the students to consider themselves in written form. Another way that I've done it, obviously it's about the questioning and making those questions accessible. This is something that has been of use to me, that's come from discussions I've had with you as well, using the levels of the alarm framework. But to actually just obviously use it, I guess use the questions that I guess are accessible for the students. So identifying, well, what is it? What does it look like?
One point here is I would like to make is it's wonderful when teachers begin using this the way they want to use it. It's not some set in stone definite way. It's just, that's the running sheet that you saw before, as here. That's sort of the running sheet here. But then this gets translated into something that you're comfortable with, the kids are comfortable with in your context and your subject.
Yeah. And what's nice here is that these are questions, what, why, how, that we've all been using forever.
Yes.
But when we see them and how they obviously just sit so nicely in that alarm matrix.
See an order to it.
It really just obviously just clarifies what can be a very simple process in many ways for students to work through. And this is hopefully something that I would then be encouraging my students to be able to do without me. And hopefully the skill is that if we can work through some of these components collectively as a class, they then have a skill they can take away and explore new concepts on their own.
So I haven't asked this yet.
Yeah, please do.
Don't get alarmed. Does this help them take the risk?
Well, certainly.
You know what I mean? Like, especially from here, that's taking quite a risk for some kids.
To this critically, so how well? I mean, making a judgment.
Making a judgment.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, some students, I think my experience has been is that they really are great at having an opinion.
Yes.
Particularly in legal studies in relation to how effective something is or not.
An informed opinion.
An informed opinion is the drive. Yeah. Certainly, I think it does.
Yes.
But I think what it also does is maybe slows some students down. Not that we want to slow their learning down, but if students are very, I guess, quick to make a judgment and reach a conclusion, that's great. But to obviously pull them back a step and to ensure that this judgment is informed and is supported. And so we could almost then, some might want to start here about, well, how important on a scale of 1 to 10 do you think this is? And they might say 9, miss. Okay, great. But then we might even be able to backward map and then go, okay, well, how do we know this? And how and why does this work?
That's wonderful, because what I'm trying to get across is that line is really that reflective process.
Yeah.
You know, that metacognitive.
And the reflection could work maybe both ways then.
Wow. Forward reflection. Okay.
And
I like that.
I guess, and this process, even if we go...
See the reflection, deep understanding, now you've got the reflective process.
There we go.
There you go.
So if I go back to this other one, which is sort of that more comprehensive setup, I think what this
So you've taken me up to this evaluation level.
Yes.
Now, remember this question is we've got to do something with all those reflections.
Yeah. So jumping down towards possibly the end of our study of this unit of work, I would be encouraging the students to then consider, reflect upon the different evaluations and the different conclusions they may have reached about different components.
Yeah, these are conclusions, aren't they?
Yeah, I see them as conclusions for different elements or components of their content, of their syllabus dot point areas. And obviously then looking at then coming to an even deeper conclusion, or even reaching a deeper understanding by gathering their evaluative statements, their conclusions, and then coming to what I would see as an overall critical analysis.
Yeah, kind of funneling all this down into this area.
Yeah, and obviously this would then enable them to then have, I would hope, a very deep and a very holistic understanding of the criminal justice process, the criminal justice system, and then to be able to then start to make a holistic judgment or a critical evaluation there. And then I'm hoping that obviously through our discussion, through the use and the unpacking of different examples, they will have a deep appreciation of how this works and the extent, hopefully, to which it is appropriate, successful, beneficial, whatever indicators of success we may be looking at.
Do you think you find when they come down to these areas that really sort of is the answer to the question?
Well, I would hope that we're then almost coming full circle.
Yeah.
Because if we would start with some discussion about, well, what is crime? Why do we have laws about crime? Whatever sort of, introductory, quite, I guess, simple questions in a way. We could then reorientate back to and say, okay, well, now that you understand this process, now that you've reached some considered judgment about different components and elements, how do we now feel about the topic as we began 8 or 9 weeks. And I guess this
That's
then...
very personal.
It certainly
so that's
could
very
be.
getting down even to the appreciation level.
Well,
So what do we now think? Yeah.
what do we now think? Or what do you now think?
Yeah, that's really a personal. But now it's more informed, I guess.
I think it's the informed judgment, certainly. And in terms then of where we could take this and where I would be then using this framework, is that this has been a framework for learning for me. This has been a framework that will help to guide my programming and my teaching.
And it's come in at that reflective moment also during the program, is it?
Certainly.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to get to that reflective evaluative stage multiple times throughout our learning.
Can we look at your syllabus again?
Certainly.
Just to remind. When I look at this, I'm going, oh wow, so much here. Does that help manage?
I think
that?
it does. I mean, I think it helps the students organise and manage what really easily, on first glance, looks like a lot of content. And it certainly is a lot of content.
I bring it up because so many subjects, there's so much content. When we're content driven, you have to learn that.
Yes.
So, but if it's like this, you're given this on your syllabus, maybe what I'm hoping is this alarm system,
Yes.
whenever you bring it in, helps bring some kind of order to that, helps students manage it.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. And I guess it's the building of skills in our students as well. That if we can model what might be required to really deeply understand a concept, then hopefully then they can have some autonomy, they can have some, I guess, confidence to also go through the process of learning themselves.
That's really assessment as learning.
An assessment as learning, yeah. I guess it's a nice point to make though at this stage is that we've talked through a component, for example, bail was the one that I mentioned a few minutes ago, and having to obviously, build our knowledge and develop all the way to an evaluative conclusion.
Yeah.
I don't always need to do that. So sometimes I actually maybe only need to go to a pure content level.
Okay, for some of your syllabus.
For some of these syllabus concepts. It's amazing, and it's obviously encouraged if we can actually then deeply appreciate and evaluate a component or a dot point. But our syllabus doesn't require us to go to that depth all the time.
Which is fine.
Yes.
At least, and that's a point to make because so many times teachers think they have to use the whole system for everything. It's not that way. Sometimes you only need this much for some of those dot points or some of the points in your syllabus.
Certainly. And I mean, back to this sheet as well. Some of our syllabus concepts or content actually only need to be named, defined, explained.
Yeah.
And maybe some analysis. And we can then actually stop at that point.
Yes.
Some students might want to make a judgment. They might want to start to reach a personal conclusion. But it will just be dependent upon the depth that our syllabus documents require.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's sort of good for me to continue to remind myself because it's very easy for this content to become unruly and to become difficult to manage.
Absolutely.
For myself as a teacher, but also for the students.
Okay, so the big end is, so what are they supposed to do with this? How do you see this works to help them answer that question? What do they do how does this inform their responding side? What are they meant to do?
Well, as a tool for learning, as we've spoken about, really effective, but also as a tool to help guide their responding. We spoke about the process of collecting these concluding statements or these concluding evaluations to reach an overall understanding. Now, this obviously could be then a synthesis of their ideas that they've been able to, collect and make judgment on, and then obviously push these ideas together. This synthesis of ideas is their obviously overall holistic understanding of a course or a unit or a concept.
At each student's particular level, in fact.
At their level. For me, this is then a fantastic tool where I can then ask the students to reflect upon, well, what is your holistic understanding? What do you think? How do you appreciate? How do you appreciate this topic, or how do you appreciate, the nature and the focus of this question I've asked you? This synthesis here, their critical analysis that they've reached, can then be directly used to help drive a thesis that they can then have and build and develop for the purpose of responding.
Yeah.
And hopefully that becomes very clear to students. Again, at their level, depending upon, how deeply they've been able to apply examples or, things like that.
Yes, I like that. So this is the bottom. This is what they learned last, more or less.
Yeah.
And now this
can then inform, or this can actually be what they're able to then write first. And we might call that a thesis, or we might call that the stem of their argument.
Which an essay is, basically, an argument. So it's sort of, that will begin with, that's their premise, if you like. That'll go first, and these inform the middle paragraphs.
Yeah, and I think a point there as well might be is that the students now have a wealth and depth of understanding that to actually create a response to this question in an exam setting, they will have to go through a process of making some decisions and choosing.
Do they feel more
argument.
confident now? You think now that they can put that first, now they have this to back them up?
I certainly think so. I mean, this is a place to start.
Yeah.
And I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think they can then go along a process of choice. So now going back possibly to where we've named to define certain components, there can be a process of selection on which ones of these components do they think best demonstrate the question or best demonstrate their analysis and opinion. Because
That's interesting.
as much as we want to talk about all of these components, we
hadn't
never have to.
Before, now, seeing, like, this is a whole process in itself. They're learning that as a process, and processes within the whole process itself.
Yes.
That's nice. That's good.
And just to then make that really clear about how their overall synthesis and their overall critical analysis, the conclusion they reach last can often be, the sentences they're writing first.
Yeah. So it's the process of learning that process, but the learning, then it'll be the process of coming to their response.
Yeah, I've just got an example there of a student example, a student response. And we can see here, without going into too much detail about every word used, the overall analysis that this student came to then actually was really their thesis. And
can you read that sentence?
So the thesis of this student was that, and quite simply in a way, law reform is somewhat effective in reflecting the changing moral and ethical standards of the community in relation to the criminal justice system. Refers to change or alteration in legislation achieved by amending or repealing existing laws or passing a new law.
So you can hear the judgment words.
Yes.
You can hear they're actually addressing that question to the extent they want to do that with their own thesis. Wow, so, that's good.
Yeah, and I guess it provides a clarity and a very clear response to the question that sets the student up, hopefully, to then be able to then structure and to organise a clear response.
That's really good. Okay. Is there anything else you can think of? I think that's really good. The whole process is being driven by the matrix, but it's not, it isn't, it's helping you to become more creative with this until they can actually reach this point.
Certainly.
That's good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Max.